Hey guys and gals, welcome back. So today I'm getting over a little bit of a sickness or something, and so if I start hacking or making weird noises, uh, sorry, I can't edit it out. I haven't chosen to learn how to edit these videos. I know how to edit, but I just haven't taken the time to do it. So if you can be patient with me, I greatly appreciate it. So today we're also going to do something similar to what we did last week. Actually, let me get out of the way because I don't want to put my head in front of the captions. Last week we split up the lecture into two videos, and this week we're going to do the same thing because aptitude assessment and career assessment are two different things, although they get applied together oftentimes. And I'll explain why and how that works as we go through here. But we're going to start with aptitude assessment. So let's first talk about what aptitude assessment is. That's kind of an important starting place. We've talked about things like personality. We will eventually talk about things like intelligence, like our innate capacity to learn things or to know things, our kind of smarts. We'll get to that later. You've probably taken tests in achievement, what you know up to now. But when we talk about aptitudes, we're talking about the potential for what you could know in the future, like your capacity to understand and learn and grow and perform in a different way in the future. That's your aptitude. It's like saying when you take the GRE, what's the likelihood you're going to be able to perform in graduate school? When you take the SAT or ACT, same kind of thing. It doesn't matter like what you've learned up to that point. It matters how likely are you going to be successful in the future. These are aptitude tests. So abilities are present day capabilities to perform a task. Aptitudes are future capacity to perform a task, something like that. The things involved in measuring aptitude are both what you know now, your acquired knowledge, and your innate abilities to determine potential. So we're kind of toying with both. If you ever take a test like this or take multiple different kinds of tests and you're like, it seems like they're kind of asking for the same stuff, it's because we kind of are. When you're measuring intelligence, you also measure acquired knowledge, and you also measure things like innate abilities, and they're kind of related in some senses. But these are more, aptitude tests are more specifically focused on how can you, it's not just like this general understanding of smarts, it's like more specific, what kind of things can you perform and could you learn in terms of oftentimes like job functioning, something like that. So, we don't need to split hairs too much right now, but you'll see how they're used. And once you see how they're used, it might make a little bit more sense. And I mentioned they're used for work potential. So we'll talk more about that as we go here. Most of what this PowerPoint is going to be about is just a bunch of different examples of different kinds of aptitude tests. So here's one. I happen to have taken this one in high school. It's called the ASVAB, or the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And when I was in high school, I didn't much care for school or know why I needed to take standardized tests. I just knew that I had to miss out on a class day and that I was forced to sit and take a test that I had no idea what it was for, but somebody else was going to be using it for something, and I figured they were probably going to be, I don't know, trying to recruit me or something, which they absolutely did. However, I think I performed so poorly that they were like, we don't want you. You're okay. Stay where you are. I don't think that's true or not, but anyway, it's designed specifically for high school or post-secondary students, college students, to help them enter to find out what specific military emphasis job they could be specialized in. So when it comes to our going into the military, it's not the same as going into the civilian world, because in the civilian world, you might be able to be a mechanic on a car or a truck. But in the military world, you might have to work on tanks or helicopters. Those are different kinds of things, right? And they might have similar skills required, but different specialized knowledge. And so the idea is to like figure out how can we get people into the right kinds of jobs, intelligence, mechanics, I don't know, being an officer, whatever it is. So that's what that one's for. Here's a list of the different subscales. I'm not going to go through exactly how it works and what kind of knowledge they ask for and all that stuff, but just suffice to say that it's specifically for the military. And there's some other stuff in here too. By the way, if you notice down here at the bottom, it says also uses Holland scores. I'm not going to talk about the Holland scores yet. I will get to that in the next lecture on career assessment, and you will hear about this stuff in other classes in much more detail. But basically what that means is when understanding where to place people in jobs, one of the most important factors is not just what you know and what your aptitude is, like your mental capacity, but what do you like doing? Because if you don't like doing something, even if you're smart enough to do it, you're probably going to burn out and get sick of it, right? So Holland scores are a way to help with that stuff. The differential aptitude test is very similar, only it is more designed for employee selection. So one of the things about this chapter, I'll mention this at the end too, but one of the things about this chapter is that it's highly focused on human resources as like how do you pick good employees and how do you match a job with a employee, and that's great. I mean, that's an important function. The career assessment hasn't always been that focused on private industry like that. Initially, most career assessment was done for the purposes of pushing people into the correct jobs in the military. Like if you're going to draft a whole bunch of people into World War I or World War II or whatever, and people are flooding in to help out with the cause of a country or something, how do you handle moving people to the right position really fast? That's what some of the assessments were really intended to do. And then obviously in high school, you want to get kids who are growing and learning to sort of choose the right career path. And those are still important functions of career assessment. However, when it's also being used for big companies to help funnel people into the correct positions or determine whether they're right for that position or not. Because it wouldn't be great in an interview if you could say, great, you look like you have everything you need on paper and people really like you, but can you actually perform the job? What we have is you've gone to school and graduated, but can you actually do the skills we need in our specific industry or our specific site or something like that? Those are being used kind of like this. So anyway, the differential aptitude is another one. It can be administered in groups. One of the things that it's uniquely helpful for is it can be used for early identification of exceptional learners. In other words, some are focused on identifying where a person can go in terms of like career direction. Do you have the intelligence high enough of intelligence level to do this kind of job? However, this one is particularly sensitive for what if a person is like exceptionally good? It can pick that out instead of just saying like, what's the minimum level you need to be good at? What about if you're really, really good? So this can be used for that. And by exceptional learners, we're talking about just different kinds of learners too. Like for example, several years ago, I was working at a community college and there was a program I think it was in Fargo. Microsoft has an office in Fargo. And they were specifically looking for people on the autism spectrum to apply for the jobs doing data analysis, because people on the autism spectrum some people have a specifically good ability to scan through huge amounts of data and find little tiny things, like little specific, like picking out a number. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, basically, in ways that people like you and I may not be good at, like sifting through huge amounts of data for long periods of time and still being good at it, because usually we fatigue and we just don't notice details like people on the spectrum can some. So that would be an example of using this aptitude test to see if you're on the spectrum, if you have that eye for detail, so you can do that very unique and specific job for a company like Microsoft or whatever. Another one, this is a really common one, the general aptitude test battery. Here's another example. It was originally designed for the U.S. government for state employees. In the same way that I explained it was for the military to like find, tank operators and intelligence officers. This is just for like federal government, because the federal government is a huge employer and is looking for ways to sort of, if somebody applies for the job, are you a good fit for this job, both in the public sector, and it can be used for private employers too, but it was initially designed by the U.S. government to help with this kind of employment thing. It can be administered in groups and individually, and then here's the subscales. One of the things you'll notice about the subscales is that a lot of them are very similar. A lot of them test verbal aptitude, a lot of them test numerical aptitudes. spatial aptitudes, like can you visualize things in your head? Like if you're somebody who has to, I don't know, like an electrician has to be able to look at a wall and say, I can see probably where these electrical lines are moving. And somebody like a mechanic says, I know how the inside operations of an engine work. And so I can visualize that, whereas not everybody has that skill. So that's one of those things. One thing I'll point you to here is that in the ASVAB, they specifically need to know about electronic information. That's one of the subscales here, which there's not a lot of people in the US government that need to know about electronic information unless you're working as an electrician or something like that. So these things vary slightly, but you'll see a lot of the same ones too. Now, the Career Ability Placement Survey, also called the CAPS. This is one that's probably more fitting in the career assessment PowerPoint that I'll go over next. So I think I'm going to save it just in case. I think I talk about it there, and I'm actually going to show you some examples of it too. So I'm going to skip over it right now. Here are some of the subscales. I'll talk about those later too, but I'll come back to this one during that presentation if I need to. I will say this. In most career evaluation, there's a process of understanding, kind of to do like a holistic assessment. It's not holistic in the sense of like both environmental and individual and social factors and that kind of thing. Not like the ecological Bronfenbrenner model that we sometimes talk about. But what I mean by holistic is that in career assessment, there's usually three main areas that get assessed in most thorough career evaluations. One of them is a person's interest. Do you actually like doing the thing, which I mentioned already? If you don't like it, you're probably not going to stick with it very long, right? The other one is, even if you like it, are you able to do it? Do you have the capability? And this is what we're talking about when we think about aptitudes. It's not just, can you do something now? Are you able to perform it now? But can you learn new skills? Can you pick up new skills? That kind of thing. So that's what the CAPS is actually a name for this whole system, but the interest part of it is also called the CAPS. The COPS is the abilities version, and then interest, abilities, and then also considering a person's values. When we talk about values, we mean a bunch of different things, but specifically here in the CAPS system, they talk about things that are very similar to Myers-Briggs personality type indicators as well. Are you a people person, or are you a kind of reserved and introverted where you like to do work by yourself? Do you like to be very practical and just make things work and function, or do you like to make things pretty and aesthetic? Is it sort of fashion over function kind of thing? So there's those kind of values too. Do you like to work within rigid guidelines, or do you like to work with flexibility, that kind of stuff? Those are important as well to help you find the right fit for not only the right occupation category, like be a counselor, but also the right job too, wherever you end up working. Okay, so I'll come back to this one a little bit later. There are specialized tests as well, lots of different ones for unique industries. Here are some examples of clerical ability tests. The reason specialized tests like this are important is because if somebody comes in and says, I've been a truck driver for 25 years, and now I have chronic pain in my back, and I've put on a bunch of weight, so like I have to, put a bunch of weight from sitting in my truck is occupational hazard, and now I have chronic pain from sitting in my truck, and so like I'm coming back to find out if there's another career for me because the doctor said I cannot continue to do that work, just as an example. So what do you do with the person like that? Do you put them in a job as a construction worker? Well, no, their back is not gonna feel good if they're doing construction work, right? So what's available to them through the career evaluation process? You find out options, and it's not uncommon for people to say, well, my body is tired and it's broken from years of working on the road or doing construction, whatever the thing is. And so we say, let's find you a low impact job, or what we sometimes call sedentary jobs, like doing office work or clerical work or something like that. And so the question is, does a person have the ability to learn that clerical stuff? Can they learn those clerical skills, or can they do them? And so there's a bunch of different kinds of clerical ability measures to use. On the flip side, if a person wants to go in and learn to be a mechanic, that's a whole different thing too. Like finding out their mechanical comprehension. Remember when I said about like visualizing the internal workings of an engine? Can a person actually do that? And then on a much more practical level, could they operate a wrench? Could they pound a hammer? Can they do those physical manipulation tasks too? The category of psychomotor ability. This is part of what I was just sort of mentioning. Arm and hand steadiness. Can you actually do that? Imagine your surgeon went to medical school, is incredibly intelligent, but just can't hold his hand steady. You think they'd be very good at being a brain surgeon? Do you want a surgeon operating on you if they're shaking like this? Probably not, right? So it'd be good to know before you invest a ton of time and energy of whether you have the physical disposition to hold your hand steady enough for that kind of thing, right? Finger dexterity. Can you move and manipulate objects? Manual dexterity. Can you move your hands to turn and rotate things? Multi-limb coordination, static strength, visual motor skills, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of different ways the body moves and ways that we use our bodies in our work. And these are things that can test for that. This is particularly important when you're talking about various disabilities, especially if there's like an injury. These get used a lot in the voc rehab world because if someone gets injured, let's say they have like a rotator cuff injury, they're playing, 2 years ago, I think I was playing ultimate frisbee, and of course I did a very amazing diving catch for a thing. I don't know if that's true, but somehow I probably just like tipped over and hurt my shoulder. So, well, not a big deal, but when I lift heavy things, I can feel it. So a normal day-to-day, I can move it around just fine. But as soon as I'm lifting any kind of weight, I'm like, oh, there it is again. I remember what that was for or how that happened. So would I be able to go in and lift 50 pounds if I wanted to work in the stockroom at Target? Maybe not, right? So that's a good thing to find out is after injury, can I do certain tasks? And so we use that kind of stuff in the rehab world a whole bunch. I think this is the last slide, even more. Yeah, it is. Surgical training, there's virtual reality testing. So you probably have heard about, or maybe you have not, I don't know. But you maybe have heard about surgeons who are now using, instead of just putting a knife in your hand and looking through your glasses, using virtual reality to go in through things like, what do you call them? A periscope, basically. I don't know if that's the technical term, but like a little camera that goes inside a person's body and it has little, reachers or grabbers or something like that. And they manipulate basically like a video game. They put on glasses and look through a thing or look at a screen and then manipulate the tool. It's that kind of stuff that is getting so specialized when it comes to medicine that there's now surgical trainings like that. And also the ability to say, can a person actually do this kind of stuff? Another one that's challenging, they're a little different, but they're challenging, is artistic ability testing. Does a person have the capacity to learn, say, a musical instrument, or are they able to hear certain sounds or see color differences and that kind of stuff? So those are pretty unique, but they happen. And then, of course, like driving simulations, that kind of stuff. It says admissions test, and it also says we're skipping this. I don't know why I wrote that we're skipping this, but I mentioned earlier about these, so I'll just make a quick comment on them. Tests like the ACT, the SAT, the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, all those kind of tests. I mentioned earlier that what they're for is to test the future ability of a person's success either in college or graduate school, or GMAT's the med school test. LSAT's the law school test. What they're for is to test the future ability. So I don't know why I skip over them, and now I'm forgetting what I even wanted to say about them. But yeah, so I think we'll just skip over that one for now. But that's the last part of this. So I will see you in the next career evaluation presentation, I guess. My brain is so foggy right now from being sick, so if I sound like I'm a complete bonehead, either I am or I'm just sick and this happens. So anyway, one of the things that I'll say this on camera too. one of the things that I tell students in class and in the program is that there are going to be days when you are not performing perfectly. And so part of the reason why I don't edit crap like this out is because I also try to show up as authentic and genuine as possible. And that means showing up when I'm sick and when I'm not doing my best and when I say goofy things and when I feel kind of silly sort of stumbling on these things. But I also think that's okay because I'm human just like everybody else is. And so I try not to edit these out, even though it's like kind of embarrassing to feel like I should probably have my stuff together a little better. But then again, I just don't always, and that's okay too. So anyway, either that sounds like an excuse for me being a bonehead, or you believe me and that we're all human. So okay, I'll leave it there. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.